It was the winter of 1936, a ridge above a creek in Letcher County, Kentucky. A man came home from the mine with coal dust in the creases of his hands. The mine had gone to 2 shifts a week. He walked into a cabin his grandfather had raised by hand. He found 3 things wrong before his coat was off. The chinking between the logs had crumbled, and the cold poured through. The back door dragged so hard a child could not open it, and the spring spout past the porch dripped itself dry in the night. He fixed all 3 before the lamp was lit. A handful of clay and lime worked into the gaps, 1 long screw driven deep past the jamb. A disc of leather cut from a worn harness strap. 20 minutes, end to end. There was no one to call, and no road out of the holler to call them down. He did not think of himself as a craftsman. He was a man who tended what was his. In the mountains, walking away from a broken thing was not a choice. Use it up, wear it out, make do or do without. That was not a saying stitched on a sampler. That was every single day. That knowledge is not gone. It is sitting in a toolbox in a shed that has not been opened since your father passed. Number 19 quiets a hinge that has screamed for 2 years. It uses something already on your shelf. Number 9 stops a crack from splitting a stone foundation for less than a biscuit. And number 3, the fix every mountain family did before supper now runs $400 to $800 when a contractor does it. These 25 repairs were never about money. They were about never needing rescue. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down the 25 lost Appalachian mountain repairs every family knew, the ones no contractor wants you doing yourself. Number 25. Silencing a squeaky cabin floor with powdered graphite. You found the pine board that cried under your weight. You worked powdered graphite down into the seam with a stiff card. You packed it until the gap filled and the squeak died. No tools, no tearing up the floor. In a crowded cabin, a board that screamed at midnight woke everyone. The old-timers worked it in bone dry, never wet. Moisture only swelled the wood and brought the squeak right back. A squeak is not a broken floor, it is 2 dry boards rubbing. Number 24. Chinking a log wall with clay and lime. You raked the old failed daubing out from between the logs. You mixed creek clay, a little lime, and sand into a stiff mortar. You pressed it hard into the gap with your thumbs. The wind stopped. In a mountain winter, a finger-wide gap between 2 logs was the whole difference between a warm room and a cold one. The old-timers packed splints or rock into the deep gaps first, so the mix would not slump out in the thaw. The cabin did not need rebuilding. It needed its seams closed. Number 23. Bringing a rusted cast-iron skillet back with lard. You scoured the rust off with salt and a rag. You wiped the iron bone dry. You rubbed a thin coat of lard over every surface. You set it in a hot oven until it smoked and turned black and slick. A family cooked 3 meals a day in 1 iron pan. A new one was money better spent on flour. The old-timers swore by a thin coat, never thick. Too much lard turned sticky and gummed instead of sealing. The pan was not finished. It was neglected. Number 22. Resealing a leaking stovepipe with furnace cement. You let the wood stove go cold. You brushed the rust and soot off the joint where the pipe met the collar. You worked a bead of furnace cement around the seam with a putty knife. You smoothed it flat. The smoke quit leaking into the room. The old-timers ran the first small fire with the door cracked. The cement cured slow that way. Rush the heat, and it cracked straight through. The stove was fine. The joint had worked loose. Number 21. Stopping a dripping spigot with a leather washer. You shut the water back at the spring box. You pulled the stem out of the spigot. You cut a clean disc of leather from an old harness strap, sized to the seat. You pressed it in where the worn washer had failed. The drip stopped cold. The old-timers soaked the leather in a little tallow first. It seated soft against the brass and never cracked. Not a plumbing job, a refusal to lose good water. Number 20, sharpening a dull axe with a flat file. You wedged the axe head steady against a stump or a vise. You pushed a flat mill file across the edge in firm strokes, always into the blade. A sharp axe bit deep and split clean. A dull one bounced and wore a man out by noon. For a family that heated and cooked with wood, a keen axe was the whole winter. The old-timers finished the edge on a whetstone wet with spit. They drew off a fine burr so the steel would hold. He kept the one he had sharp. Number 19, rehandling a tool with green hickory. You knocked the broken stub out of the axe or hammer head. You shaped a new handle from a split of seasoned hickory with a draw knife. You worked it until it seated snug. Then you drove a wood wedge into the top to swell it tight. A handled tool was whole again for the cost of a tree on your own land. Hickory grew on every Appalachian slope. The old-timers let a new handle sit a few days before hard use. The wood took a set and would not work loose. A broken handle was never a dead tool. Number 18, patching a leaking tin roof with roofing tar. You found the rust hole or open seam where the water came through. You cut a patch from a flattened tin can, a hand wider than the hole. You bedded it in roofing tar and pressed it down hard. You smeared tar over every edge. The leak stopped. A drip through a tin roof rotted the ceiling boards. The old-timers patched on a hot, dry day. Tar laid in the cold, never bonded, and peeled by spring. The roof was sound. One small hole was not. Number 17, closing a drafty door with felt strip. You cut the felt strip to the length of each side of the frame. You pressed it firmly along the doorstop on all three sides. You shut the door against it until the seal ran tight. No gap left anywhere. In a cabin heated by one stove, every gap around that door was warmth walking out into the snow. The old-timers found the leaks first with a candle. They ran the flame slowly around the frame on a windy night and watched where it leaned. The cold came through the gap. The felt closed it. Number 16, quieting a squeaky hinge with a dab of lard. You tapped the hinge pin up out of the knuckle. You smeared it with lard or petroleum jelly. You tapped it back down. The screech was gone for good. Every mountain family knew that dry metal grinding on dry metal made the noise. Any thin grease ended it. What separated a quiet house from a loud one was not skill. It was the willingness to lift one pin. The old-timers wiped the old grime off the pin first. Fresh grease wants clean metal to work on. That hinge needed a knowing hand, not a repairman. Number 15, rebottoming a chair with hickory bark splits. You stripped the broken seat from the chair frame. You soaked thin splits of hickory bark until they turned soft and pliable. You wove them over and under, across the frame. You drew each one snug until the seat would hold a grown man. For a family that took every meal at one table, a new set was unthinkable. The old-timers kept the weave tight and even. A loose split sagged and tore inside a month. The chair was not trash. It was missing a bottom. Number 14, plugging a leaking wash tub with a soft wood plug. You found the split seam or rusted pinhole in the galvanized tub. You whittled a soft pine plug a touch larger than the hole. You drove it in from the inside and trimmed it flush. The wood swelled against the wet metal and sealed itself. A washtub did the laundry, the bathing, and the canning for a whole household. The old-timers swelled the plug with a soak before driving it. It locked tight the moment it touched water. The tub was not done. It had one small hole. In 2023, the home repair and remodeling industry in the United States cleared over $600 billion. In the mountains in 1936, the average family spent close to nothing on a hired repairman. Not because nothing broke, because the family inside fixed it. A recent survey found fewer than 1 in 5 homeowners feel sure of themselves making even a simple plumbing repair. In the hollers of Appalachia, that number ran the other way. Most folks would have been quietly ashamed not to know. The knowledge did not slip away on its own. An economy was built on replacing it with a service call, 1 decade at a time. No one had to burn the old books or hide the tools. They only had to convince you, slow and steady, that your own 2 hands were not fit to touch your own home. Your grandmother's hands were worth more than any maintenance plan ever sold. Number 13. Reglazing a broken pane with linseed putty. You cleared the broken glass and old hard putty out of the frame. You brushed boiled linseed oil onto the bare wood. You set the new pane and pressed glazing putty in with your thumb. Then you drew the bevel clean to 45 degrees in one steady pass. A glazier wanted real money to set a single pane. The putty cost a few cents. The old-timers oiled the bare wood first. Dry wood drank the oil out of the putty and let it crack away in a season. A man who kept a can on the shelf called no one. Number 12. Patching a plaster hole with paper and clay. You dampened the broken hole in the wall. You pressed torn strips of paper into it in overlapping layers. You let each one dry before the next. Then you finished it smooth with a clay and lime skim, drawn flat with a wet knife. The old plasterers called it the poor man's lath. Layered right, the paper gave the same key that wood lath gave, for next to nothing. The old-timers tore it with the grain so the strips lay flat. Torn wrong, it bubbled under the skim coat. The paper was not a shortcut. It was the answer. Number 11. Repacking the leather on a hand pump. You pulled the rod up out of the well pump. You cut a new cup of soft leather to fit the bore. You seated it onto the plunger where the old dried one had shrunk away. You soaked it well and dropped it back down. A pump that lost its prime left a family hauling buckets from the creek. The old-timers kept the leather oiled and supple. A dry cup let the water slip past, and the pump sucked air. The pump was not broken. Its seal had worn. Number 10. Tuck-pointing a failing stone chimney. You raked the crumbling mortar out of the joints, 3/4 of an inch deep. You dampened the surrounding stone. You pressed fresh mortar in with a pointing trowel. You struck it to a clean line. Failing mortar let water seep behind the stone. In winter, that trapped water froze, expanded, and pushed the chimney apart for good. The old-timers dampened the stone first. Dry rock would pull the water out of fresh mortar before it cured. The stone was sound. The mortar between it was not. Number 9. Patching a foundation crack with hydraulic cement. You chiseled the crack wider at its base than at its mouth. That way the patch locked itself in and never pushed back out. You mixed hydraulic cement to a stiff paste. You pressed it hard into the crack. You held firm pressure for 3 minutes while it set. Hydraulic cement hardens under moisture instead of being ruined by it. It seizes inside the crack itself. The old-timers mixed only what they could press in within 3 minutes. Once it's set, there was no working it again. Every man learned that exactly once. The wall was not failing. It had a crack. Number 8. Freeing a stuck window with a paraffin candle. You ran a plain paraffin candle firmly up and down both channels of the sash. You went until the wax seated into the grain. The window slid smooth and quiet. Wood swells with the mountain damp and binds tight in the channel. That swelling is the whole problem. Paraffin ends the friction in 30 seconds at no real cost. The old-timers waxed the channels twice a year, spring and fall. The window was not broken. It was swollen tight. There is a man on a ridge in Holler County, Kentucky. He is 81 years old. He can reseat a valve. He can repoint a stone wall and patch a plaster ceiling. He can name what ails a wood stove by the sound it draws from the next room. He learned it beside his father, who learned it beside his father, a man who came up hungry and threw away nothing that could still work. No one has asked him to teach any of it. His own grandchildren call a contractor down from town. When he is gone, the instinct goes with him. Not the facts. Those live in books on a shelf. The confidence. The thing that looks at a broken object and reaches for a solution before it reaches for a phone. That cannot be handed down in a weekend class. It is built one repair at a time, and only by starting. Number 7. Sealing a threaded pipe joint with hemp and pipe dope. You wire brushed the male threads down to clean metal. You wound hemp fiber clockwise around them in tight overlapping passes. You brushed pipe dope over the fiber. You threaded the fitting home hard. The joint did not weep a drop. Hemp and compound are still among the most reliable thread sealants ever used. The old-timers always wound the fiber with the threads, never against. Threading the joint pulled it tighter instead of bunching it loose. He sealed it once, for pennies, and never thought of it again. Number 6. Sharpening a handsaw with a triangular file. You clamped the saw flat in a vise. You filed every other tooth with a few steady strokes. Then you turned the blade and filed the alternating set the same way. A sharp saw cut straight and clean and did not bind. A dull one wandered, split the board, and wore out the man pushing it. The old-timers kept every tooth the same height. One tall tooth grabbed and pulled the cut-off line. He did not blame the saw when it quit cutting. He sat down and sharpened it. Number 5. Repacking a leaking valve with graphite string. You shut the main. You backed the packing nut off the valve. You wound 3 tight wraps of graphite string clockwise around the stem. You snugged the nut back down over it. The drip at the handle stopped. A weeping valve stem is almost never a failed valve. The old packing has simply dried out and shrunk away from the stem. The old-timers snugged the nut just past hand tight. Crank it down too hard, and the handle would not turn at all. He replaced the string around it, not the valve. Number 4. Re-squaring a sagging gate with wire and a turnbuckle. You ran a diagonal wire from the high latch corner down to the low hinge corner. You threaded it through a turnbuckle. You tightened it until the gate pulled itself square again. A sagging gate is a simple matter of diagonal force. A diagonal wire answers it directly. The old-timers always ran the wire from the top of the latch side to the bottom of the hinge side, never the reverse. The wire pulls where a brace pushes. He did not build another gate. He understood why it sagged, and he countered it. Consider what the trades charge now for the work in the back half of this list. A plumber bills $150 an hour. The national average for a simple faucet or valve repair runs $300 and up. The parts inside cost between 1 and 5. A mason quotes you 4 figures to repoint a wall a mountain man fixed across one Saturday morning. You are not paying for materials. The materials are pennies. You are not even paying for real skill. You just watched how plain the work is. You are paying for the long, quiet decades in which you were told that touching your own home was too complicated for ordinary hands. It was never too complicated. It was only made to feel that way. Not a repair bill, a bill for permission to call someone. Number 3. Rehanging a sagging door with one longer screw. You drove a single 3-inch wood screw through the top hole of the upper hinge. You sank it past the jamb and deep into the solid framing behind. The whole door lifted square. A sagging door is almost never a problem with the frame. It is one stripped screw hole that has carried the full weight for 30 years. The old-timers reached for a screw long enough to clear the soft jamb and bite the stud behind it. The door did not need rehanging. It needed one longer screw. Number 2. Waterproofing work boots with beeswax and tallow. You warmed the leather near the stove. You worked solid beeswax and a little tallow into every seam until the leather drank no more. Then you buffed it smooth. A man's one good pair of boots had to last 3 hard mountain winters. A sealed seam was the line between dry feet and months of misery. The old-timers treated the seams twice as heavy as the uppers. The stitching was always where the water found its way in. The boot did not need replacing. It needed tending. Number 1. Looking at the broken thing before reaching for the phone. That is the whole list. Every repair, from 25 down to 2, began with the same act. A man or a woman walked over to the broken thing. They crouched beside it. They looked at it close. They touched it, moving the parts with their fingers. They found what was loose, what was worn smooth, what had shifted out of true. And most of the time, what they found was small. A dried-out seal, a stripped hole, a gap that wanted filling. The fix took less time than finding the right number would have. But it asked one thing no service contract can replace: the plain belief that you can understand what has gone wrong. Your grandfather carried that belief as his default, his whole life. Not because a board had certified him. He had looked at broken things through the leanest years these mountains ever lived. He fixed them with his own 2 hands. The doing of it over and over made him certain. That certainty is still here. It cannot be bought at any price. It can only be built, one repair at a time. We did not lose the tools. They are still out there, in the shed, in the can, in the drawer. We lost the confidence that reaches for them without first wondering whether we are even allowed to try. And we lost the voice that once stood beside a child at a cluttered workbench, patient, calloused, certain. The voice that said, "Watch me. I will show you this one time. Then you will know it the rest of your life." These 25 repairs were never a list of chores. They were a vocabulary. And the families who spoke it, through the hardest years these mountains ever faced, could walk into any broken room and make it whole again. Start looking.